Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this online side event to launch the GCHR Annual Report 2022. I have to say it was a very busy year for all members of our team. But maybe I have to mention the most pleasant, successful achievement that we managed to have, which is getting the UN ECOSOC consultative status. Of course, this achievement happened only because of our work. For years, we campaigned to get the ECOSOC status, and before the end of last year, we got it. Of course, that will give us more strength to do our work using the various mechanisms of the UN system. But back to the establishment of the Gulf Center for Human Rights, I have to mention my colleague who is serving life in Bahrain, Abdul Hadi Khawaja, and who is denied access to a cardiologist as he has some heart problems. I have to mention his work and his commitment to human rights. He is the main co-founder of this organization. On the 6th of April 2011, he told me, Khalid, that's it. We have to start our work. We have to seek funds for the Gulf Center for Human Rights. Unfortunately, after 3 days, he disappeared for weeks, tortured, and he needed 37 medical interventions due to the torture, the massive torture that he was subjected to. Still, our hearts with him, our prayers for our colleague, Abdul Hadi. I have to mention the other co-founder, Nabi Rajab, who jumped immediately and joined me in these early days in which we got no fund, but we got our commitment to human rights. We managed to do a lot of work. And as you see, the organization at the moment is in a very healthy status. We are working almost in the whole MENA region. I have to mention another colleague. It is Ahmed Mansour, the member of our GCHR advisory board. He's still in solitary confinement since his arrest on the 20th of March 2017. Of course, this is regarded as torture. Ahmed Mansour, a courageous human rights defender. I could say that he was the last defender in UAE who managed to provide the international community with the latest updates about violations committed by the authorities in UAE. So I have to mention Ahmed Mansour, and we are going to continue our work to ensure his release together with our colleague Abdul Hadi. And then I have to mention my other colleague, who I know him personally. He's my friend, Dr. Muhammad Al-Qahtani, who's supposed to be released on the 22nd of November last year, but disappeared. Until now, he went missing and has no communications whatsoever with his family. Of course, we will continue to work for his release and the release of all the other detained human and women human rights defenders across the MENA region. And last year, we did a lot of capacity building training workshops, and I have to mention one of them, which was in Tunis. We managed to train 15 young journalists on many skills, including safety and other skills that are needed for journalists. That was the first time we go to Tunis, and we plan to go to other countries. Our capacity building training workshops are going to continue this year and all the coming years. And also I have to mention our close work with the various UN mechanisms, including the UN rapporteurs. We are working with them closely, and we are continuing to organize MENA meetings for them to consult with the women and human rights defenders across the region. We managed to do a lot of work with regard to the protection of journalists and the protection of women human rights defenders. All of that together with our ongoing daily work in documenting the cases related to the at-risk human rights defenders using the various mechanisms. Also, we thought that we have to do some innovation in our work, and we managed to do some activities in the streets of Brussels in front of the EU Parliament, demanding the release of all the detained human rights defenders. I think it was a very successful year, although we witnessed a lot of violations, but we are going to continue to be the voice of the voiceless. Always we are going to work to achieve our objective, which is to enhance the protection of human and women rights defenders, to make sure that they have a healthy environment in which they could do their legitimate and peaceful human rights work. Now it's time for us to listen to our colleague Claire Nevin talking about the findings of this report. So we listen to Claire.
Hello everybody, I'm Claire Nevin. I'm a lawyer and a researcher at the Gulf Centre for Human Rights, and I'm delighted to present to you the findings of our annual report, Human Rights in the Gulf region and neighbouring countries. And this report covers our activities, including the practical support that we've provided to human rights defenders and civil society actors across the region, and the campaigning and advocacy work that we have conducted throughout the course of 2022 alongside our allies and international partners. I'm only sorry that I can't be here to present the findings of this report to you live and to answer any questions that you might have, but for this I leave you in the very capable hands of my colleagues.
The program on women human rights defenders. Yes, we listen to you.
Thank you, Khaled. Distinguished participants and attendees, friends and colleagues, representative of civil society organizations and member states, it's my pleasure to be with you today on this panel, along with my friends and colleagues. And I'm going to be speaking briefly about the women human rights defender situation in the region. So please excuse my mature and wise voice of today because I've been ill recently. So let me start by giving you a bit of perspective on the GCHR's Women and Human Rights Defenders Program that aims to support and protect women and human rights defenders in the region through our innovative projects and tailored activities based on the needs of women and human rights defenders themselves, and of course, taking into consideration the developments in the region. This can be possible only through partnerships and coalition with the human rights organizations, groups, and individuals to help and support women human rights defenders in the region as adequately and promptly as possible. We try as much as we can to focus on their work and the struggle they live on daily basis and allow them the accessibility to UN mechanisms. And I think my colleague Michael will be talking about this in his part of this panel. The program also intends to mainstream gender perspective within the GCHR's work and all of our activities. I would like to invite you to read the report because the findings are really interesting and it highlights some of the work we've been doing and we did last year. But also let me tell you about the situation in general of women and human rights defenders in the region, basically in the Gulf and neighboring countries where we work. Women and human rights defenders in the Gulf and MENA in general are severely targeted by every means possible, not only for their activism, but also for their fundamental identities as women and activists at the same time. Globally, there is a huge gap of information between perception and reality. And as you may know, the GCC countries have been investing majorly in whitewashing, greenwashing, pinkwashing, and every kind of washing campaign they can afford to help its propaganda about the situation of women human rights in the region. As human rights have been always a controversial issue to the GCC states, the entire MENA region in general, Any attempts to have independent CSOs, human rights entities and public movement is usually faced by crackdown, austerity, and authoritarianism. By means judicial harassment, imprisonment, targeting family members of our colleagues of activists, gender-based discrimination, violence, and harassment, whether online or offline, travel bans, and femicide. The use of social norms, religious beliefs against women activists is one of the main tools. It attempts to stigmatize them and forbid them from their work and mute their demanding voices. At the same time, authorities in the GCC countries and the neighboring countries in MENA in general have been investing in electronic troops dedicated to misinformation to support their narrative on a human rights situation in the region and to turn a blind eye on the human rights violation committed on a daily basis against women human rights defenders and civil society organizations activists working on human rights in the region. By talking, for instance, about attempts to abolishing the guardianship system in some of the countries in the region through reforming laws, however, it seems that such systems have been exported to other neighboring countries where prolonged conflicts and disasters left women and young girls more vulnerable than ever, and their rights continue to be degraded. Despite these challenges, women human rights defenders in MENA region continue to play a vital role in advocating fiercely for rights of women, not only in the region, but everywhere. They are at the forefront of campaigns to end violence against women, to promote equality in education and employment, and to protect women's rights in conflict and complex contexts. We allow the women human rights defenders the safe spaces where they can share their ideas, reflect, and work collectively within guided by support and protection as much as we can afford. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, thank you for your endless effort to provide support for the at-risk women and human rights defenders across the MENA region. I think then we move to my colleague, Michael Kambata, in charge of advocacy in Geneva. He will talk about our work last year in Geneva and elsewhere in terms of advocating for the enhancement of protection of human and women rights defenders. Yes, Michael, we listen to you.
Thank you, Khaled. I'm afraid it's a shame. I was meant to be following other speakers, so I'll try and re-summarize a few things first. First of all, generally, what advocacy is, we are trying to influence the behavior of states and other actors in order to improve human rights on the ground, but also to have other actors calling for improvements of human rights on the ground. I'm the Geneva representative, and I work primarily with the UN institutions and the state representatives to the UN institutions here in Geneva. And obviously, we're trying to get action at various United Nations human rights mechanisms that will both change the behavior of states, but also strengthen the norms that exist. So essentially, one of the strong points that GCHR has is that we have a very strong network of human rights defenders and contacts with human rights defenders on the ground. These are people who often have to stay anonymous, and by communicating with us, we are able to share the information that they provide to us. And this builds the credibility of what we say because we have access to what's really going on the ground. When we talk about trying to act in Geneva, that means we're trying to impact, as I said, the human rights mechanisms. So this includes at the Human Rights Council, where we try and impact resolutions or push for resolutions to be made either on countries or where we try and impact thematic resolutions. For an example, currently there is a resolution each session on Syria. That's an example of a country resolution where we try and have impact. The other is a thematic resolution, such as on human rights defenders, freedom of expression, and many others, which we try and impact by providing input into the state text for resolution. We also sign a wide variety of public communications. That means letters and statements, but that also means events. Currently, one of our focuses for the past years is to try and have the states resume action on Saudi Arabia. So we've been holding a series of events with partners, such as side events, virtual and hopefully soon to be non-virtual, as well as briefings for states to try and get them to address the deteriorating situation there, which will be a bellwether for the rest of the GCC countries. That's speaking towards the Human Rights Council. We also speak to the UPR process, which is sometimes parallel or on top of the Human Rights Council, but is an independent process. That's the Universal Periodic Review, where every state is reviewed every 4.5 years. And recently, Bahrain and UAE have been in the process in 22 and 23, and Saudi Arabia will be coming up for shortly in probably with a review in 2024. We work with partners to provide the states with the submissions, and also speak to states to try and improve the recommendations that they give. That's the strength of the UPR. States recommend to other states changes that need to be made on their human rights activity. In addition to that, we have been involved in certain other UN mechanisms, such as the Committee Against Torture, where we participated in a submission and then the hearing by the Committee Against Torture last July. So those are just some examples of what we are doing here. Advocacy, of course, goes well beyond what's done in Geneva. There are actions in Brussels, in Washington, but in the interest of time, I will stop here. Otherwise, I just want to summarize the thought that we use the information that we collect to be a strong and credible voice at various fora around the world in order to improve and pressure for human rights standards globally.
Thank you a lot, Michael, and no doubt we will continue our international advocacy work, knowing the fact that there is no any local remedy in most of the countries of the MENA region to address the human rights violations. I have to speak on behalf of my colleague, Deputy Director Zainab Al-Khawaja, who's in charge of the program to protect journalists and also in charge of the Human Rights Defenders Fellowship program. The reality about these two programs, they are designed to support journalists and human rights defenders. Through the first project, we managed to separate the skills of investigative journalism, and we publish many reports that are all the time conducted by young journalists. And also with the second project, we managed to move to safety some at-risk human rights defenders. We are continuing with this project, the fellowship project, hopefully next year to expand it to have more people and also to have more countries. Now it's time to go to the findings and also to listen to Christina. So, yes, Christina, go ahead.
We had several campaigns this year. One of the new campaigns we had with the Innovation for Change MENA Hub was the We Act Together campaign. And I'm just slowly scanning through the annual report, which you can find today in English and Arabic on our website. Through the We Act Together campaign, we managed to highlight stories of positive success stories in Bahrain, Iran, and Morocco, and throughout the region, reaching over 14 million people on social media. Through this campaign, we wanted to, instead of routinely talking about the violations that happen to human rights defenders and civil societies, to highlight some of their successes and getting their stories heard. In addition, we continued the work of the Alternative Human Rights Expo, which started the year before to provide an alternate forum for the work that we were doing to free human rights defenders, but in a creative way to highlight their voices from behind bars. So, for example, we had the poetry of our colleague and board member, Ahmed Mansour, and we had songs from Tunisia and Palestine and art from Yemen and people speaking from across the region, including a short story by our colleague Abdulhadi Al-Khawaja. We are hoping to hold this forum again in November ahead of the Dubai, the COP28 to be held in Dubai. So these are part of our ongoing campaigns and efforts to raise the voices of human rights defenders. I think that if we can play the video for Claire, we could go to that. Otherwise, I could read the recommendations from the report.
Our colleague, Claire Nevin, a lawyer, she supposed to read the findings, but she's busy. I have to thank her for all her endless efforts to support our work. Yes, Christina.
Excuse me, Khaled, but I think I can just put the voice from Claire's video because we have a problem with the photo, but the voice can be there. So if we have the report on screen and I can play the voice of Claire, okay, that would be okay.
Thank you, that is so good. So put the findings and then we will hear the voice of Claire, our colleague Claire. Thank you so much.
Findings of our annual report, Human Rights in the Gulf region and neighbouring countries. And this report covers our activities, including the practical support that we've provided to human rights defenders and civil society actors across the region, and the campaigning and advocacy work that we have conducted throughout the course of 2022 alongside our allies and international partners. I'm only sorry that I can't be here to present the findings of this report to you live and to answer any questions that you might have, but for this I leave you in the very capable hands of my colleagues. So over the course of 2022, as the report makes clear, the Gulf Centre has continued to highlight cases that might not receive the attention that they truly deserve in a media landscape and an advocacy landscape that is still overwhelmingly dominated by the English language. And our ability to get that information and to publish it and to raise awareness of those cases continues to be a real benefit of our work, and something that has been certainly clear in our work in 2022. Over the course of 2022, the Gulf Centre has continued to raise awareness and campaign for imprisoned human rights defenders and women human rights defenders across the region, those suffering torture, enforced disappearance, and arbitrary detention.
These are the recommendations that Claire was going to read at the end of the video.
Mm-hmm.
GCHR recommends that governments across the MENA region repeal vague and punitive legislation that exerts a chilling effect on or even criminalizes peaceful human rights work, freedom of expression, and freedom of association. Governments across the MENA region enact legislation on human rights, freedom of expression and assembly, and information technology in line with international human rights norms. Governments across the MENA region repeal archaic and oppressive laws limiting women's freedom and enact progressive rights protecting legislation fit for the modern era. Authorities across the region tackle impunity by enabling thorough, transparent, and independent investigations into the perpetration of attacks, assassinations, enforced disappearance, arbitrary detentions, torture, and ill treatment against human rights defenders, civil society activists, journalists, lawyers, and academics. The international community ceased to embolden the region's governments in committing human rights violations with impunity by pandering to the efforts of oppressive countries to sanitize their image on the world stage. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Christina. I think now we see if there are any questions. Any questions in the chat box? Seems there is no any question. With that, I would like to say that we, the team of GCHR, will continue our work despite the fact that we have a very hostile environment in MENA. People are getting killed or disappeared due to their peaceful and legitimate human rights work. But that is not going to stop us from, as I said, our human rights work. We will continue this task, difficult task. I have to thank all members of our team, and in particular the distinguished speakers. I would like to thank Christina Stockwood, Waham Youssef, and Michael Kambata, in addition to my colleague Claire Nevin. With that, we conclude and we wish everybody a nice day. Thank you so much. Bye now.